Everyone wants to be Mediterranean. They want to be tan, they want to live on the blue water, but nobody wants to learn how to drive a boat. It's true though. You look at the Mediterranean lifestyle and what's not to like. But you don't necessarily want to apply everything about their diet. You like certain things within your diet, right? You don't want to throw it all to the wind and full bore go Mediterranean. I totally get that. So what are the foods that are in the Mediterranean diet that can offer a powerful punch that you can implement into your life to add that Mediterranean sort of flair, if you will? So we're going to cover this. Let's dive right in. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, check out House of Macadamia down below. If you like macadamia nuts, and yes, they're a Mediterranean food, you've got to check these guys out. That's a 20% off discount link down below that you're not going to find anywhere else off any products from House of Macadamia, whether it's straight up macadamia nuts, macadamia nut bars where the first ingredient is macadamia nuts, sugar-free white chocolate covered macadamias, dark chocolate covered macadamia nuts, you name it. Not to mention the highest quality macadamia nut oil you'll probably find on the market. So that link down below saves you 20% off, and you can support an awesome organization that's supporting farmers in South Africa, doing some awesome things while bringing the best tasting macadamia nuts I've ever had. Plus, with any purchase using that link, a free 20-ounce bottle of cold-pressed macadamia nut oil. Literally the only cold-pressed macadamia nut oil that I know of that's on the market. And you're getting one completely free if you just use that link down below. There's no catches, it's just to get the word out there. The first food that you can add into your lifestyle without going full bore Mediterranean and having to buy a catamaran is going to be lima beans. Now, you probably turned off this video, and if you're one of the lucky ones hanging around and you weren't scared off by lima beans when you were a kid like I was, you'll learn that lima beans actually pack a really interesting metabolic punch. They're one of the few legumes that I would say, yeah, you can eat this. Like legumes can be a little iffy sometimes, a high carb content, but what is it about lima beans that's doing something different? There's actually some evidence suggesting that it improves insulin resistance. What's happening here? So there was a study published in Nutrients that evaluated 18 different studies. It's what's called a meta-analysis. And they found that there were improvements in metabolic health only in people that were diabetic or insulin resistant. Now that sounds kind of bad because you're like, oh, it only helped those people. Well, first of all, a large percentage of the population is diabetic or insulin resistant. But second of all, this means that it's doing something somewhat corrective. So out of these 18 studies, 5 talked about people with diabetes or insulin resistance. And of these 5 studies, 3 of them show that lima beans triggered a reduction in HbA1c, sort of your 90-day lagging indicator of how high glucose has been over the last 90 days, your glycolated hemoglobin. Okay, 2 of the studies showed decreases or improvements in insulin resistance overall as soon as lima beans were in place. And then 1 of the studies showed a decrease in postprandial glucose, but I'm gonna leave that aside because that's kind of irrelevant because lima beans are high in carbs. It's gonna be hard to see a decrease in postprandial glucose. Either way, I digress. So with this, we have to get a little more mechanistic. Okay, there was a study published in Nutrients that used what is called isoelectric precipitation to extract the proteins and understand sort of the antioxidant component of lima beans. They found that the proteins in lima beans contained antioxidant powers, essentially. Like they had the ability to produce antioxidant effects within the body. So it's not polyphenols, it's not anything, it's the proteins having an antioxidant effect, which is quite unique. So I'm not just here saying like, eat as much as legumes as you can, go vegan or anything. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that lima beans, maybe have a lima bean salad, maybe have something like that. They're actually good when you're not 7 years old. When you're 7 years old, they just look funny and they scare the hell out of you. But when you're older, they're actually kind of cool. Anyway, the next one is one that is going to be very easy for you to add in, but we want to get a little selective about the kinds. We're talking about fruit. Mediterranean cultures, for the most part, some of them don't, but for the most part, eat fair bits of polyphenol-rich fruits and carotenoid-rich fruits. There's a study that was published in the journal Food and Nutrition Research that found that there is an inverse correlation between fruit consumption and oxidative stress. The more fruit consumption, the less oxidative stress. Now, you don't want to be loading up on a bunch of like GMO, crazy high sugar fruit. I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting a moderate amount of fruit with meals, with some good amount of fiber, is probably a good thing. They also found in the same study that there was a positive correlation between carotenoids that are going to be in like things like watermelon, maybe some oranges, maybe some mangoes, things that give that kind of orangish and red color. Positive correlation between carotenoids and inflammation. So more carotenoids, lower inflammation. The Mediterranean cultures typically have lower levels of inflammation, so that's quite good as well. However, I don't suggest you go eat a bunch of oranges. They're super high in sugar, and so are mangoes. So out of this category, perhaps you eat a little bit of watermelon. It's 90+% water, a lot of citrulline, good hydration, and really not that much sugar as far as glycemic load is concerned. But we need to talk about berries. We need to talk about berries, apples, and grapes. Now, when I'm talking grapes, I'm not talking about going down to the local Piggly Wiggly and getting some grapes that are the size of a tennis ball, like those weird GMO things. There's barely even grapes. I'm talking good old-fashioned, small, organic red grapes. Because there's an interesting paper that took a look at this. It was published in the journal Nutrition, and it looked at 17 different trials, and it found that grape polyphenol consumption, whether it's from grapes or similar polyphenols you can get from raspberries and apples, things like that, they found that that increased total antioxidant capacity within the body. What they found with that is it increased what's called superoxide dismutase, which is an endogenous antioxidant the body produces to neutralize free radicals, but it also increased what is called the ORAC score, so free radical oxygenate or free radical neutralizing capability. So basically the ability of the body to neutralize free radicals increased when subjects consumed more berries, apples, or things like grapes that are rich in these polyphenols. So little bits here and there, maybe just like a half a cup. You don't need much. You're gonna be stoked on this one. I hope you've stuck around because now we're talking about the one processed meat that has an additional health benefit. Okay, sometimes, most of the time, we demonize processed meat. Sometimes we give it a net neutral effect. But in the rare occasions you find a processed meat that has a health benefit. I'm talking about Parma ham. And I've talked about Parma ham while I'm doing my Costco hauls before. I've been mentioning it, I've been like, this stuff is my jam. Parma ham is just cured in salt, then it's dried. Maybe it's pressed a little bit, then it's cured again, then it's pressed, and it's dried. Okay, so there's no real additives to it, maybe some herbs. When you cure ham this way, you achieve some additional biopeptides that might have some interesting benefit, mainly something called carnosine. Now, as an athlete, I'm familiar with carnosine as a supplement. Carnosine is used commonly in athletes to help buffer sort of the lactic acid, the acidic pH that happens when you're training. So it helps basically increase your stamina a little bit. But carnosine is one of the biopeptides that increases more when you cure ham. There was a study published in Obesity that found that 2 grams per day of carnosine improved postprandial glucose levels and improved insulin resistance. So we know something's going on there. Maybe it's buffering inflammation a little bit, who knows? But what is it about Parma ham and carnosine? Well, with that, we look at a study published in Nutrients that I find fascinating because it compared dry cured ham, like Parma ham, to cooked ham. Okay, 80 grams per day of cured ham, 100 grams per day of cooked ham. They did this for 4 weeks and they found that the cured ham, and only the cured ham, reduced platelet activation, reduced monocyte activation, which means it basically prevented the immune system from going overactive. It chilled it out. So when you're talking about an overactive immune system and inflammation, it simmered it down now.
Add it up. Simmer plus down plus now equals simmer down now. Now simmer down now.
Also found that it decreased MCP1 and decreased interleukin-6. So inflammatory markers across the board went down, which makes sense as to how it affected insulin resistance. Insulin resistance and inflammation kind of go hand in hand. When there's inflammation, it's like static that's making it so that insulin cannot signal to the cell as well, thereby leading to more insulin resistance. This next one is interesting. Now, originally I wanted to talk about an interesting shellfish that I got turned on to, like, I don't know, maybe 18 months ago. It's called whelk. But it's hard to get whelk everywhere. It's abundant in the Mediterranean regions, but I roped scallops along with this because some of the nutrient profiles are similar as far as the minerals are concerned. Whelk is super, super high in B12. Okay, I'm a big fan of shellfish because shellfish, the mineral profile like the zinc, the manganese, the copper, the selenium are sky high, really good. And the B12, particularly in whelk, we're talking like over 300% of your RDI. So B12 helps metabolize homocysteine into methionine, which is involved in DNA repair and overall just generally healthy things that have to do with gene expression and DNA repair. Also, bringing homocysteine levels down, homocysteine levels that are high are not exactly good for our heart and our cardiovascular system. So when we're looking at evidence-based in what we know with the heart and cardiovascular system, bringing homocysteine down is good. So a little bit of whelk, a little bit of scallops a couple times per week might be a powerful protein punch where you can add that Mediterranean flair, call yourself a Mediterranean sailor without totally moving to the Mediterranean. And the last thing is going to be one I talked about earlier, and that's macadamia nuts. Now, macadamia nuts are not technically grown in the Mediterranean. Okay, they're typically grown in the South Pacific or in South Africa, in some cases in Hawaii, but not a ton. But the thing is they fit that Mediterranean flair. Okay, they fit it well because they're high in these monounsaturated fats that are tremendous for overall insulin resistance and glucose management. There's a study that was published in the journal Lipids that gave subjects 40 to 90 grams of macadamia nuts every day for 4 weeks, and they saw significant improvements in their inflammation and their oxidative stress. So it has a powerful antioxidant effect within the body, but it might just be because of how it impacts inflammation and the ability for the body to deal with these things. Additionally, the omega-7s, something that's called palmitoleic acid, these seem to reduce specifically very low density lipoproteins, VLDL. LDL can be a problem if it's out of hand, but the one that's the real problem is the very low density LDL. If you were to get what's called a fractionated panel from your doctor, you'd see that LDL is broken down into different categories, and VLDL is the really bad one. Macadamia nuts are unique with this omega-7 in that it seems to impact VLDL. So from insulin sensitivity all the way down to lipid profiles, macadamia nuts are the bee's knees. So I recommend usually like just an ounce a day. You don't need that much. It's easy to overdo them and they're calorically dense. So kind of throttle that a little bit. But if you implement these foods in, you can be Mediterranean without being Mediterranean. I'll see you tomorrow.